Hi everyone, so today we're going to be talking about complexion basics. So how to pick colors, some application techniques, general tips, tricks, good rules of thumb. So thanks for watching and I hope you enjoy. First thing you want to do when you pick out your foundation is you should really understand what the undertone on your skin is. So most people are generally speaking going to be yellow, pink, or olive undertone. In women of color you'll see more golden, red, or even like a deep violet undertone. And in really fair skin tones you may even see like kind of a bluish undertone to the skin. So a couple quick tricks. Obviously any makeup counter or any makeup store can definitely tell you what undertone you have in your skin. Other than that, if you just apply pressure to your wrist for a couple seconds, when you let go in kind of that white area, you'll be able to see what color undertone you have. You'll be able to see either like the pink or the yellow or whatnot. So that's a really nifty trick. Another thing that you can do is your skin will instantly spit out what it isn't. So like let's say if you put a yellow based foundation on your face and you have a pink undertone to your skin, you'll immediately be able to see that yellow start coming up, so you'll know that that's not your true shade. So you can do that as well if you're in the store and you're playing around. So those are some real quick tips. The other thing I will say is surface tones in the skin. If you have a lot of redness or discoloration in the skin, maybe if you have rosacea, there's a difference between a surface tone and an undertone, and they can be really different. So definitely if you have a lot of redness or bruising or any sort of scarring or discoloration in the face, take the time to find your true undertone and match to that, not the discoloration and not the surface tone, because you'll find that you'll be much happier with the results. And again, this trick works really well for that, just because sometimes it's hard to tell in the face, especially for people that have really severe rosacea. So that's that. That's how you figure out what undertone you are. So once you've figured out your undertone, how do you actually match yourself? So here are just three really good rules of thumb for matching yourself in a store or at a counter. Is one, make sure you give the product time to oxidize on your skin, especially if you're an oilier skin type. If you have a lot of oil on the surface of the skin, once it mixes with the foundation, it can really change the color a lot. It will deepen it. So just giving it 5 to 10 minutes to warm up on the skin can make a really big difference in what color you pick. Generally speaking, oilier skin types, I usually use the shade that initially goes on a little bit lighter than their natural skin tone, but once we're all done and it warms up and mixes with the oils on the face, it becomes their natural skin tone. So I would definitely recommend you do that. Two, I would recommend that before you purchase anything, side swipe a pretty good section of your face so you can really see it, and then go out into natural lighting and really see what it looks like in natural lighting, because a lot of times you'll find with foundations you get at home and it doesn't really look like it did in the store, and that's generally speaking because stores will have halogen or fluorescent lighting which really aren't anywhere near what natural lighting will look like, so you can get a better idea of what your foundation is going to look like that way. And then the third thing I will say is never ever ever match yourself to the back of your hand. The back of your hand is a very different color than your face, and you're not going to get an accurate match if you do it on the back of the hand. Always match either to the chin or the chest, depending on what your preference is, because you'll get a much more accurate match. So those would be my little rules of thumb for foundation matching, for actually swiping the color. So next up, prepping the skin for foundation. The one thing I will say is make sure your skin is really well hydrated. You will get a much better application if the skin is really well hydrated before you apply foundation. Even if you are an oilier skin type, still hydrate your skin and you will find that your foundation goes on a lot smoother. As far as primers go, I have mixed feelings about primers. Sometimes I like them and sometimes I don't. I think it really depends on the person. Can they help your makeup wear longer? Absolutely. Color corrected primers can be nice if you're working with a lot of discoloration in the skin. It can help kind of balance things out, but are they absolutely necessary? Not necessarily. It really depends on what you're doing and what you're going for. So that's what I'll say for that. Also, primers can be useful if you're trying to cover up any uneven texture in the skin too. They can help with that. So in that case, I always use a primer on somebody who has really a rough texture to the skin or a lot of pitting in the skin, because that will definitely help smooth everything out. But if you just have an optimal skin type, then you probably don't need a primer. Just setting everything with a powder should be sufficient enough, and using a moisturizer underneath will usually be enough for an average wear. So that's that. So foundation. So I'm going to talk about the three types of, major types I should say, of foundation and how I apply them. First is powders, and I pretty much stick to the same rule of thumb with powders. I will use a natural fiber brush that's flat like this. I'll pick up the product with one side, flip it over, tap the excess, and use this side. And I'll press that into the skin, and then I'll buff it out with a kabuki brush. So those are my two tools for powder. That's always what I do. And I pretty much never deviate from that. With liquid foundations, I'll do two things. Either I'll use, or actually three things. I'll use a brush like this, which is a powder foundation, or not powder, a liquid foundation brush. A blush brush will also work for this. If it's got a rounded top to it, just make sure it's not a natural fiber brush, that it's synthetic, otherwise it will shed too much. I'll place the product and buff it out. Same thing with this one, the stippling brush. You can do the same thing. You place the product, blend it out. The nice thing with the stipple brush, though, is you can press it into the skin a little bit more. And then the other thing I will do for liquid foundations is if I am using a foundation brush, I'll use the cross-hatching technique, which is basically how I'll place the product and I'll go down like that, and then I'll go over it in the opposite direction. And this will give you a little bit more coverage with a liquid, and it will also blend it a little bit better. So that's what I use. For creams, I always use a sponge. These ones are awesome. These are the Laura Mercier sponges. They're super expensive, but they're worth it because they last forever and they're machine washable, so that's awesome. Just not with your whites. So for cream foundation, what I'll do is I'll press it into the skin. And then I'll usually either take a tissue or a clean sponge, and I'll go over and take off the excess. So yeah, so that's how I apply foundation. For pretty much everything, I just have one really big rule of thumb, whereas I always start here and work my way in so I don't get a mass amount of product distributed right into the center of the face, just because that's generally where people tend to have the most expression in the face, and their lines tend to form when they smile or laugh or frown, so you don't want to get product creasing in that area. The final step is setting your makeup. So if you're working with a liquid or a cream, you always want to set it with a powder. My favorite method for doing this is to use a fan brush, just because it lightly distributes the powder. You don't need a lot to set your makeup, you just need a little bit. So just by using just a touch of powder, it's gonna do the job. You don't need to load it on. So I tend to stay away from big brushes that deposit a lot of powder on the face. The other thing that I'll do is if I'm working with a powder, blush, or bronzer, is I'll do that first, and then I'll only go over the areas that I didn't apply that color on with my setting powder, just because when the bronzer and the blusher are powder, they're going to set the makeup for you, so why add another powder onto that? So yeah, so that's pretty much it. Those are my tips and tricks for foundation. I hope this was informational, and thanks for watching. Please comment, rate, and subscribe.